This month, the United Nations will host a Summit of the Future, which is being described as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reinvigorate global action. People from around the world will gather together to wrestle with one of the most important questions of our time. What can we do now to build a planet that survives and thrives for the generations that follow us? This is an essential question that every parliamentarian should ask of themselves, and it must reframe how we see the way we legislate, the actions we take, the priorities we pursue. And as part of this summit, attendees will vote on the Declaration on Future Generations. The Declaration's message is clear. We have a responsibility for future generations. The Declaration also stresses the importance of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and by prioritising these, we can do the vital work needed to protect future generations. The goals call on all nations to work for education, peace, health and well-being, to preserve nature, eradicate poverty and establish equality for all. But we have to work together and use the powers and leadership of our Parliament to deliver the action to make these goals a reality. Lack of action will have an intergenerational multiplier effect. Mistakes made now will be paid for long after we are gone. But positive decisions we make today could have a cumulative effect and well-being long into the future. So, Presiding Officer, we have an opportunity as a Parliament to future-proof the foundations of our country, to build well-being and sustainability into all of our policy and our planning. For example, the Balearic Parliament approved a legislative initiative called the Law for Wellbeing of the Present and Future Generations just last year. And the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, intends to appoint a commissioner with responsibilities for intergenerational fairness. So the world increasingly recognises that we have the power to shape the world for the better and to do it for centuries to come. But I think in Scotland we're not quite there yet, and we're currently missing the opportunity presented to us. There is fantastic work being done by a range of groups such as We All, Scottish International Development Alliance and Carnegie. And we've got our CPG and Wellbeing tomorrow morning. An important report produced by the Carnegie UK highlighted that Scotland is falling behind in integrating wellbeing frameworks. It stated, "We could not locate a single national policy in Scotland that the National Performance Framework has significantly impacted, and worse, Scotland now cuts a diminished figure on an international stage of wellbeing focused governments it helped establish." The one glimmer of hope highlighted in the Carnegie paper was the Scottish Government's commitment to a wellbeing and sustainability bill, which would enshrine in law the requirement to consider these factors across every area of legislation.
It's hard to take a long view in politics. We often talk about the future of the children and young people we know and see, but political timescales tend to tip the balance towards the current electorate. But what of those who aren't yet born? The UN Declaration urges us to consider them all, as it says, cognizant that future generations are all those generations that do not yet exist, are yet to come, and who will eventually inherit this planet. That's a sobering responsibility, calling on us not just to look to 2026, to 2050, or even to 2100, but as far beyond as we can reasonably expect human beings to live here. And of course, the future survival of humanity depends largely on what we do now. So we need a way to assess the decisions that we make now in terms of how their impact on future generations will shape the world to come. We need to take these responsibilities seriously, not just in politics, but in wider society too. To a large extent, compared with peoples across the earth and across time, we are cultural outliers in that we don't do this. The UN Declaration points that out, saying, many social, cultural and religious or spiritual belief-based practices, as well as numerous national constitutions and legal systems exist that seek to safeguard future generations and promote intergenerational solidarity and responsibility. That international solidarity, intergenerational equity, is particularly acute in relation to our Earth, its climate, its biodiversity, and how we can either coexist with or extract and exploit non-human nature. As the Declaration recognises, that is more important now than ever. Our decisions, actions and inactions today have an intergenerational multiplier effect, such that our conduct today will impact future generations exponentially, it says. That exponential impact demands serious, informed consideration. Sadly, such attention has not been a feature of Westminster politics for a long time. The Sustainable Development Commission, set up to do exactly that work, was abolished during the Tory Lib Dem coalition's bonfire of the Quangos. It will be interesting to see whether Keir Starmer's government chooses to reinstate it. Much of what the UN Declaration calls for is happening in civil society, including the recognition of the need for intergenerational dialogue and engagement, so dynamically enacted here in Scotland by generations working together. But other aspects of the Declaration do need government action to be fully realised. The Declaration writes of building a strong foundation for sustainable peace, prosperity and the protection of human rights as the most effective way to safeguard the needs and interests of future generations.
This government recognises the draft declaration and eagerly anticipates the Summit of the Futures this month. So I do very much welcome Ms Boyack's drawing these issues to the fore and bringing them to this Parliament's attention. It has been a useful debate, and of course, were Scotland to participate in our own right as an independent UN member state, we would be able to make a much more direct input into the development of UN positions. But even as a devolved government, we are committed to ensuring the interests of future generations are central to our decision-making. The upcoming summit presents an opportunity to renew international commitment and cooperation to the UN's 2030 agenda. Scotland remains steadfast in making our contribution to this agenda to secure a safe and prosperous world for future generations, and it's also an opportunity to take up the challenge of long-term thinking that so many members rightly highlighted today. Our goal of a sustainable wellbeing economy seeks to leave a better future for generations to come. We are devoted to the principles of a fair, green and growing wellbeing economy, which reinforce our 4 key priorities. By addressing these priorities now, we are investing in that wellbeing of the future. Our programme for government reaffirms our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals, which reflect our common vision for Scotland and beyond, and they help us to keep future generations in mind, work to deliver public services, to protect our planet and to empower people and communities. Maggie Chapman rightly pointed to the international context, and Scotland continues to be active and engaged internationally. This includes contributing to multilateral discussions and programmes on biodiversity, climate change, health, education, human rights and humanitarian crises, including working with the UN and others. The actions being progressed in Scotland's international strategy will further Scotland's contribution, and this includes pioneering global action on climate justice, galvanising international agreement on a loss and damage fund. Scotland is leading on climate action at home and abroad, including in the Global South, and this includes leadership roles as President of Regions 4 and co-chair for the Under 2 Coalition, collaborating closely with other devolved governments to progress action, including our world-leading Climate Justice Fund. But as Maurice Golden rightly said, some of our environment in Scotland itself remains degraded, and that is a challenge for all of us. And when we listen to young people, they can often identify solutions to that and other questions. This includes through Scotland's Climate Assembly, where contributions through the Children's Parliament fed into recommendations to ministers, including on legislation restricting the use of single-use plastic. We continue to engage young people in our just transition plans and the path to net zero. By prioritising climate action, we will safeguard the future for Scotland's coming generations.